Hey, so I cannot let another day go by without addressing, yes, I know it's only been 2 days, but you know what? It still needs to be talked about. Without addressing this crazy world gone mad over Gillette's new ad. Now, when this first came out, I saw it like within 12 hours of when it first came out, and I wanted to cry. It was so good. I was just like, oh my goodness, a big company just made the best ad of the year, and it's not even the end of January yet. This is amazing. Nobody is going to top this. Well, right now, guess what? That ad on YouTube, the original one, has been viewed almost 12 million times. I just checked 2 minutes ago. And you know what blows my mind? 284,000 people have clicked up and like on that ad. 674,000 people have clicked hate, dislike, down, thumbs down. They don't like this ad. And I'm sitting here trying to figure out why somebody comes out with an ad that talks about being a good human and the world loses its ever-loving mind. And you know, so I posted this on my page, and right here, Sarah McDougal, and I said, this is great. They just set the bar for the whole year. I dare any other big company to top this. This is a fantastic ad. And I have people underneath, Tina saying, I don't want my boys to be like all squishy, sissified, share my feelings kind of boys. And I'm sitting there thinking, wait, so that's what you got out of that ad? You got out of that ad that if you buy Gillette, that Gillette is saying, when they're saying that boys will be boys is not a good life mantra, that you're saying that we should like sissify and squishify all of our sons? Come on, people. Since when was it bad for men to learn to process their emotions? Since when was it considered toxic to be a decent human being and be non-toxic? When did this happen? We have had people talk for decades about how wrong it is that the marketing industry exploits sexuality because sex sells. We say this all the time, especially in the faith community. Oh, you know, we hate it because like sex sells, and so everything in our situation, like all of our marketing stuff in the whole world, society is saturated with sex selling stuff. We should have companies that talk about good things instead of just using sex to sell. So here is a company, Gillette takes responsibility by starting with busting their own ad types, their stereotypes from the past. That when those boys break through that screen, that paper, that's Gillette's old ad copy. Not copy, but you know, videos. The woman kissing the man, and if you use Gillette razors as the implication, then women are going to come up and kiss you like this. And then they go through all of these, like, bullying, predatory, exploitative behaviors, and they encourage men to stand up against exploitative behaviors. And 675,000 people think that's a bad idea. Tell me, when did we get to this point? Because see here, I'm not surprised necessarily at like the whole world out there saying all this stuff, but here's what kills me. A lot of those are Christians, people who say they're Christians. So I'm sitting here thinking, really? Christians, Christian men and Christian women are bucking against this ad that says men should be decent human beings and should care about the people around them instead of exploiting them. I'm trying to figure out where that went sideways. So I did a little talking to some friends of mine. So I have this friend, his name's Kevin. He happens to be the CEO of Carrington Case. Well, if you haven't heard of Carrington Case, it is a men's luxury accessory line. And the whole mantra of Carrington Case is that your character is what you carry, and you carry your character everywhere. And they want men of character to be carrying the Carrington Cases. Well, so I'm like, hey, Kevin. It was like 5:30 in the morning this morning, and he's in, well, I mean, it was like 8:30 my time, but he's in California, so 5:30 his time. I'm like, yo, Kevin, you seen this ad yet? What do you think of this? And he writes me back. So we have this little conversation about it because we see eye to eye on this, but I wanted to get a guy's point of view, you know? And Kevin is like, girl, this is crazy. Toxic masculinity may have become the norm, but it is not the standard. No matter how many guys fall short, toxic masculinity is never going to be the standard for masculinity. You know what? Get this. I saw this brilliant meme yesterday. It was like a blog post. I think it was from Rebecca Reynolds. And she's like breaking down like 5th grade diagramming. Masculinity is the primary piece of grammar here. Toxic is a descriptor. Toxic's the adjective. So we're not busting masculinity. Masculinity is good. Masculinity is given by God. It's when masculinity is toxic that it becomes a problem. Masculinity is not toxic in and of itself unless it is toxic. So, I mean, come on. If anybody, this is what Kevin says, so this is a guy's words, not mine. Anybody who believes that Gillette's ad diminishes their masculinity, he says, I got news for you. It isn't your toxicity being offended. I mean, it is your toxicity being offended, not your masculinity. So at what point, yes, I'm a little bit passionate about this. Let me rein my voice back down just a little bit. But at what point do we equate masculinity with being a bully, with being a predator, with being a sexual deviant? When did that happen in our minds? And mamas, what kind of boys are you raising? The other thought is, I'm sitting there thinking, you know, okay, what right do I have as a woman to do a video about Gillette and toxic masculinity? You know, what right do I have as a woman? Well, I'll tell you what. As a woman, I want the men around me to not be that kind of guy. I want the men around me to be the kind of guy who use their power to protect, not to exploit. And beyond that, I want to raise my son to be the kind of man who stands up for others. And yes, I think Jesus would buy Gillette. I mean, Jesus was kind of grew a beard, so maybe he isn't shaving at all. But if Jesus shaved, Gillette would be on his radar right now. I think it is a powerful and profound thing that Gillette has taken responsibility for past toxic marketing, exploitative marketing, and flipped that script on its head. And I am proud that they are not buckling, at least in the first 72 hours, against the hailstorm of hatred and vitriol that so many people have poured out on this. So I went and looked on Twitter. Oh my word, don't go on Twitter and search for Gillette responses to the Gillette ad right now, unless you want to potentially lose your faith in the decency of humanity. So people who are losing their minds on it are like, it's feminizing men. It's hating all men at once. No, it's not. Gillette is not feminizing men unless you believe that Jesus was feminine. And so, yeah, I mean, hey, if you're not a Christian, if you don't have any connection to Christian-based faith, then whatever, you can have your opinion, and that's fine. I respect that. But I want to talk specifically to the people, men and women, because I see some women out here just saying how this is terrible. Men and women who claim to be followers of Jesus Christ and are hating on this ad that is addressing toxic masculinity. This right here is why we have the Me Too movement. This right here is why we have an epidemic of unaddressed sexual abuse and domestic violence in the pews of the faith community, because we do not define masculinity or femininity, but right now we're talking about masculinity. We do not define masculinity according to the character of Jesus. Okay, so let's stop and talk about that for a second. Why would we think that being a decent human is exclusively the arena of women. Oh, and we do. We do. Because when pastors tell abused women to go back and suffer under abusive husbands, and yes, I know there are abusive women out there too. I'm not talking about that right now. I'm talking about the other thing. When pastors and spiritual leaders tell abused women to go back and suffer and just be more patient, just put up with it, and just be more submissive, you know what they're telling you? They're telling you that being like Jesus is only for women. Let that sink in for you for a second. They're telling you that leading like Jesus is for girls only. Because you know what Jesus said? Jesus said, "Husbands, love your wives like Christ loved the church." You know what that means? That means that men should be first. You heard me. You didn't think I was going to say that, did you? Men should go first. Yes, men should be first. If men want to love like Jesus, then men need to be first. First through the gate of danger. First to sacrifice. First to love. And first to die. In honor, in character, in goodness, in respect, in protectiveness. That's masculinity as Jesus represented it to us and to the world. Every aspect of power that God gives us, male or female, is to be used to protect those who are weaker than us or more vulnerable than us. Every gift of power given by God is for the purpose of protecting those more vulnerable or weaker than us. Never to exploit. Because you know what? We've got that flipped upside down on its head. We like to think that power is about taking power over other people. Power is about taking charge. Power is about being first. Well, you know what? That kind of power over, that is straight from Lucifer. That's what got Satan kicked out of heaven when he wanted to be equal to God and take power over everybody else. That is not the attitude of power and being first that the Bible anywhere, that Christian faith anywhere should be holding up as the standard of what it means to be masculine. So I'm sitting here wondering, all these Christian mamas who are losing their minds over Gillette's ad, which part of that ad did you want your boys to be? Which part of that ad are you raising your sons to be? The kids chasing the vulnerable boy down the street getting ready to beat him up? That's who you want your sons to be? The man coming up behind the woman to try to grab her derriere? That's who you want your sons to be? The dad who's too concerned with his grill and his beer to intervene when two kids are fighting and they need someone to step in? The disengaged, checked out dad? That's who you want your boys to be? Which part of be a good human did you not want to raise your children? You see, when we look at Jesus, Jesus had empathy. Jesus was in touch with his feelings. And Jesus was the ultimate man, right? I mean, speaking to my Christian faith community here, if Jesus was the ultimate man and Jesus wept, I mean, hey, John 11:35, the ultimate man ever broke down and cried. Why? Because his friends were hurting. Because he understood suffering and pain. Because he wasn't checked out of his emotions and too manly man to cry. That's the example we see of Jesus. The fruits of the Spirit. Let's talk about that for a second. When we talk about what it means to be a good human, when we talk about what it means to be a decent person, the Bible makes that super clear. Galatians 5:22. I got it right here. Just so I don't misquote it from memory and then somebody tries to hang me on it. But the Holy Spirit produces this kind of fruit in our lives: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and guess what? Self-control. Self-control. And so these elements, we tend to think in today's society, clearly, we think that masculinity is supposed to be allowed to be toxic, and love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control, that those are for girls. But Jesus didn't say the fruits of the Spirit, and Paul didn't write, the fruits of the Spirit produce these kind of things. The Holy Spirit produces this in the lives of girls. He said humans. That means the fruits of the Spirit are the benchmark for masculinity. That means real men learn how to be loving, joyful, peaceful, patient, kind, good, faithful, gentle, and self-controlled. And you know what? For that matter, Proverbs 25:28, a man without self-control, yeah, he's like a city with broken down walls. That means anything flows in, anything flows out. Zero control. Is that what you want to raise your sons to be, evangelical mamas? I didn't think so. So when we're looking at the Gillette ad, and all these people are losing their minds over it, let's step back, because I really don't think that what you're angry about is what is bothering you. I think that you're not angry about it feminizing men. And I'm going to use my friend Kevin's words because he said it better than I can. He tells me this morning, Gillette's ad is a mirror. If after watching it you see your reflection and you don't see a problem, it makes sense that you're offended. Because you're oblivious to how far today's men have strayed away from true masculinity. You've replaced the standard with the norm, and society is worse off for it. Gillette's ad is simply a reminder of the standard of true masculinity. Our women and children deserve our focus as men on reclaiming the standard and doing our best to live up to it every day. Gillette, I think your ad was brave. It was beautiful. It was right on target and right on time. I played it for my son and my daughter 5 or 6 times, and then they begged me if they could watch it again. We sat down and we had a family discussion, not about buying razors, but about being men, and about what we expect from men, about what we expect from ourselves as women and the men around us, about what boundaries we set and what we're willing to settle for or not. You see, I'm raising my son to be the kind of guy who, let's put it in faith, community, and church history, the kind of guy who would rather go to the stake than violate his conscience or exploit another human being, especially someone more vulnerable than himself. I'm raising my son to know that the most amazing type of masculine strength is when a man can control himself and conquer his own passions and urges and think wisely and treat people kindly regardless of how he feels in the moment. That's the kind of son I'm working to raise. And that's the kind of boys I hope someone else is raising so that my daughter has a decent man to marry when she grows up. So for everyone who's losing your mind over the Gillette ad, I hope you will think about it, because what do you want your sons to be? The boys of today, the ones who will be the men of tomorrow, and all the girls in their lives are watching. What is your response saying? And again, Gillette, thank you for making that ad.